Hello, and welcome to 4.9 Synthetic Division, Dividing Polynomials. I'm John Robinson, and let's get started. Synthetic division is a shorthand or shortcut method of polynomial division in the special case of dividing by a linear factor, and it only works in this case. So synthetic division only works with finding the roots or the x-intercepts. And synthetic division is also useful if you don't like doing long division. And this is also what one of the setups will look like for synthetic division. This is, right here, is where you put your root in the original problem. And then the coefficients go in order. So coefficient 1, coefficient 2, and coefficient 3, or however many you would like, or however many are in your original problem. And during this process, you would bring your first coefficient down, you put it there, and then you would divide it, or you would multiply it by your root, and then bring it up under to the coefficient 2. And then you would add those two numbers together, and then you get your sum. And then you would take that and multiply your root and your second sum together, and you would bring it up under your coefficient 3. Add those two together, and if that is your last number, that would be your remainder. So now that's what the process all would look like. So let's get on to one of our first problem. So here's our first problem. 2x cubed minus 7x squared minus 6x minus 8 divided by x plus 4. So the first thing you would do would be to find what your root would be. So to do that, you would set your x plus 4 equal to 0. And subtract 4 from each side, and you get x is equal to negative 4. So that is what the number would be up here. The next thing you would do is to put all your coefficients in order up at the top. So that'd be 2 first, then 7, negative 6, and negative 8. And then the first step of this process, or second step actually, would be to bring the first coefficient down, which is 2, then divide, or multiply those two numbers, negative 4 and 2, bring it up under the second coefficient, and that is negative 8. Then add those two numbers together, you get negative 1. So that's your first second coefficient for your final answer. Next thing, multiply negative 4 and negative 1 together, and bring it up under negative 6. So that would be negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. So you put your 4 there, add those two numbers together, negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. Then take negative 4, multiply it by negative 2, bring it up under negative 8, and that would be 8. Add those two numbers together, and your remainder is going to be 0, because negative 8 plus 8 is 0. So for your final answer, notice how the numbers there is x cubed and then x squared. The first number right here is going to be x squared because you already got rid of your x cubed. So your final answer would be 2x squared minus x minus 2. And this is our easiest problem. Let's go on to our second problem, which is the medium. Here is our second problem. 5x cubed minus 3x squared minus 6 divided by x minus 1. Okay, so the first thing we would have to do would be to find our root, and that would we would set x minus 1 equal to 0. Add 1 to each side, you get x is equal to 1. So that is your root, and you put it in that upper left corner. The next thing, or first thing to notice, and this is where people often go wrong, notice how there is no x to the first power variable in between. You would have to have a placeholder in your setup. So this is what the setup would look like. It would be 5, -3, 0, and then -6. You have to have 0 as your placeholder for that x to the first power. Okay, so the first thing you would do, bring down the 5, and then you would multiply 5 times 1, and you get that, plus 5, and -3 plus 5 is positive 2, so that's your second number there. And then you take 1 times 2, and 1 times 2 is 2, so you'd put 2 here, and add 0 and 2 together, which is obviously positive 2. And then for your last part, you would take 1 times 2 again, and that's positive 2, then add, or bring up the 2 here, and then your remainder will be -4. So that's your remainder. And then this is how we would set it up. So notice how there's the cubed there once again. We would have to have squared as our first coefficient, or our x squared as our first variable. So our final answer would be 5x squared plus 2x plus 2, and then since this is our remainder, we have to have it as our numerator, and then our x minus 1 as our denominator. So that would look like this, minus 4 over x minus 1. So this is what your final answer would look like. 5x squared plus 2x plus 2 minus 4 over x minus 1. Now let's go on to our last problem, our most difficult one. And here's our third and final problem, our most difficult one. So first thing you would do would be to find your root. And to do that, set 3x plus 1 equal to 0. First thing, subtract 1 from each side. You get 3x is equal to -1. Divide each side by 3, and you get x is equal to -1 over 3. So that's your root. Set it over here, -1 over 3, and then put in all of your coefficients. So your first coefficient, 3, then -5, then +4, and then +1. So first thing you would do would be to bring your first coefficient down, your leading coefficient, and then put that down as 3. Multiply -1 over 3 by 3, put it up under -5, and then you get -1 over 3 times 3 is -1. So put -1 here, and add those two together. -5 plus -1 is -6. And then you would take -1 over 3, multiply it by -6, and you get, you put it up here, and you get +2. Add those two together, 4 plus 2, which is 6. Then you would take -1 over 3, multiply it by 6, and then you put it up here, and you get -2. Add those two together, and 1 plus -2 is -1. So -1 is your remainder. Then for your final answer, remember, look at what you have up here. That's a 3, so that means your first coefficient, or your first variable, is going to be x squared instead of x cubed. So your final answer would look like this. 3x squared minus 6x plus 6 minus 1 over your original 3x plus 1. So this is what your final answer would look like. Alright, this has been the lesson of 4.9, synthetic division. Thank you for listening, and have a good day.